The debate hall was electric before the first word was spoken. Spotlights carved across the polished wooden stage, illuminating two men who represented opposite visions of America. On one side, Gavin Newsom, slick, polished, radiating the confidence of a man who saw himself as the future of the Democratic Party. On the other, Donald J. Trump, larger than life, carrying the same aura that had made him the most polarizing figure in modern politics. The moderator barely got through the introductions when Newsom pounced. His tone was steady but laced with condescension, his smile sharp. "Mr. Trump, leadership is not about chaos. It's not about dividing people. Leadership is about stability, responsibility, and respect for institutions. And frankly, your record shows the opposite." The audience murmured. Cameras zoomed in to catch Trump's reaction. Newsom straightened his tie, clearly relishing the moment. He leaned on the podium like a professor scolding a wayward student. "You speak about strength, but strength without wisdom is recklessness. You talk about America first, but your leadership left America isolated. That's not vision, that's vanity." For a moment, silence filled the hall. Some in the crowd nodded at Newsom's words. He was framing himself as the adult in the room, the teacher giving a lecture. He thought he had Trump cornered. But Trump didn't move. He didn't blink. Then, slowly, he leaned into his microphone, that familiar smirk curling on his lips. His voice rolled across the hall, deliberate, mocking, and unshaken. "Gavin, you've had a lot of practice giving lectures. California's been listening to your lectures for years, and look what it's gotten them. Sky-high taxes. Homeless encampments on every street corner. Families fleeing your state in record numbers. If that's your definition of leadership, no wonder California's collapsing." The hall erupted. Gasps, applause, and even laughter filled the air. Newsom froze for half a second, caught off guard by the ferocity of the reply. Trump didn't let the moment slip. His eyes locked on his opponent, the smirk turning sharper. "You don't get to lecture me on leadership when your own state is the punchline of America." The audience roared again, and suddenly, the stage belonged to Trump. The moderator tried to cut in, but the noise in the hall made it impossible. Trump held his ground, letting the energy of the crowd swell before driving his next point home. He pointed across the stage at Newsom, his voice rising with that unmistakable cadence. "You want to talk about responsibility? Your cities are falling apart. San Francisco looks like a third-world country. Businesses are fleeing faster than ever, and you call that leadership? That's not stability, that's surrender." The crowd erupted again, some on their feet, others clapping wildly. The camera cut to Newsom, who forced a tight smile, trying to regain composure. He raised his hand, signaling for quiet, and leaned toward his microphone with controlled defiance. "Mr. Trump, California is a beacon of progress. We're leading on climate change, on technology, on diversity. While you divide, we build. While you shout, we solve." It was a polished line, crafted for the cameras. His supporters applauded, but the room felt split. Trump tilted his head, almost amused, then fired back without missing a beat. "You solve? You can't even solve basic law and order. People are afraid to walk down the street in your cities at night. Families are leaving by the hundreds of thousands. If that's your idea of building, you're building nothing but excuses." The tension was palpable. Newsom tried to step in with statistics, rattling off job growth numbers and renewable energy investments. But Trump cut him off, raising his hand dramatically, commanding the room's attention. "You're great with numbers, Gavin. But here's one for you: California has lost more residents in the last 3 years than any other state in the country. They're not leaving because of me. They're leaving because of you." The words landed like a hammer. The audience gasped, then erupted once more. Newsom tightened his grip on the podium, but the smugness was gone. Trump had turned his polished lecture into a live indictment. The moderator finally stepped in, his voice firm, trying to restore order. "Gentlemen, let's keep this civil." But the tension was already boiling. Newsom leaned forward, determined to reclaim the upper hand. "Donald, you thrive on tearing down. I thrive on lifting up. California isn't perfect, but we're moving forward. Unlike you, I don't live in the past, clinging to grievances and chaos. Leadership means progress, not division." For a moment, the lines seemed to steady him. His supporters clapped, relieved he was back on offense. He straightened, his polished smile returning. Trump let the applause simmer, then cut through it with a voice that carried over the hall like a thunderclap. "Progress? Gavin, your version of progress has turned the Golden State into the homeless capital of America. Tents on sidewalks, crime through the roof, businesses shuttered. That's not progress. That's decay, wrapped up in fancy words." The audience roared, some laughing, some cheering, while others booed in outrage. Trump raised his hand as if swatting away the noise, leaning closer to his microphone. "And you say I live in the past? No, Gavin. I live with the people. The workers. The farmers. The families who can't afford to fill their gas tanks or pay their rent because of leaders like you. They don't care about your polished speeches. They care about results. And you've given them nothing." The camera zoomed in on Newsom's face. His smile had vanished, his jaw tight. He tried to jump back in, his voice clipped. "California leads the nation in innovation, in green energy, in technology." Trump cut him off with a smirk. "And in people leaving. You lead the nation in failure. You lead in bad policy. You lead in people running away from your so-called leadership. That's the only thing you're number one at." The crowd erupted, chants of "Trump! Trump!" filling the hall. Newsom clenched the podium, his polished lecture drowned in the roar of Trump's unapologetic counterattack. The debate hall felt like a pressure cooker now, the roar of the crowd bouncing off the walls. The moderator tried again to regain control, but Trump raised his hand and the audience quieted almost instantly. He leaned forward, his voice steady but cutting. "Gavin, you talk about innovation and green energy, but you can't even keep the lights on. Remember the blackouts? Families sweating in the dark because California's grid couldn't handle the load. And you want to lecture me about leadership? Please." Laughter rippled through the audience, followed by applause. Newsom's jaw tightened, but he tried to push back. "At least we're leading in the fight against climate change. At least we're looking ahead, not backward. Under your leadership, Mr. Trump, America pulled out of international agreements, abandoned allies, and became a global embarrassment." The words were sharp, and a section of the audience applauded loudly. Newsom leaned into the moment, sensing momentum. "You think leadership is about bluster and bravado. I think leadership is about building bridges, not walls. About bringing people together, not tearing them apart." The line was designed for headlines, but Trump's smirk widened. He nodded slowly, then delivered the blow. "You're right, Gavin. I build walls, strong ones. The kind that protect families and jobs. You build bridges, right out of California. And people are running across them as fast as they can to leave your state." The hall exploded. Some laughed, some booed, but the energy surged. Trump let it ride for a moment before striking again. "You want to talk about global embarrassment? Try walking through San Francisco. Needles on the ground, crime through the roof, homelessness like I've never seen. That's not leadership, that's a disgrace. And yet here you are trying to lecture me on how to run a country?" Gasps swept across the audience. Newsom gripped his podium so tightly his knuckles turned white. He tried to interject, but Trump cut him off, voice booming with finality. "Gavin, if leadership looks like California, America better run the other way. The crowd went wild. Even the cameras caught stunned faces in the audience, and for the first time that night, Newsom looked rattled. The moderator's gavel tapped against the desk, his voice rising in a plea for calm. But the hall had transformed into a battlefield of cheers, boos, and laughter. Newsom took a deep breath, leaning in with the poise of someone determined not to let the night slip away. "Mr. Trump, your rhetoric might play to the crowd, but history will judge leadership by results. Under my vision, California is leading America into the future. Under yours, America was dragged into chaos." His delivery was smooth, rehearsed, and confident. His side of the audience clapped loudly, trying to restore the balance. He raised his chin slightly, savoring the applause. But Trump, never one to let the spotlight drift, waited just long enough for silence before speaking. His voice was calm, deliberate, but cutting like steel. "History will judge, Gavin, you're right. And history will say this: California, under your leadership, became the symbol of failure. Businesses abandoned it, families fled it, and your so-called progress left people living in tents on sidewalks. That's not a future. That's a warning." The room erupted. The tension was so sharp it could be felt through the cameras broadcasting nationwide. Trump adjusted his stance, pressing harder. "You want to lecture me on chaos? Chaos is when families can't afford groceries because of your party's inflation. Chaos is when criminals walk free because leaders like you tie the hands of police. Chaos is what you've created in California, and you want to spread it across the country." Newsom's expression faltered, but he tried to jump back in. "At least I didn't leave the country divided and disgraced on the world stage." Trump shot back instantly, his words like a thunderclap. "No, Gavin. You just left your own state divided and disgraced. And the world knows it. That's the difference." The crowd went wild again, half cheering, half booing, but the energy was unmistakably in Trump's favor. Newsom gripped the podium, his polished composure cracking under the weight of the moment. By this point, the debate had gone far beyond policy talking points. It had turned into a clash of visions, egos, and sheer willpower. The audience could feel it. The stakes weren't just about California or the Republican base, but about the future of the country itself. Newsom steadied himself, his voice crisp as he tried to pivot. "Mr. Trump, you can throw insults all night, but America deserves more than slogans and anger. We deserve leadership that inspires. We deserve leaders who tell the truth, not ones who build their careers on division and lies." He paused, letting the words hang, his side of the audience applauding loudly. Newsom pointed toward Trump, his voice sharpening. "Leadership isn't about fear. It's about hope. And you've spent your career spreading fear." For a moment, Newsom looked confident again, his polished rhetoric echoing through the hall. But Trump leaned forward, eyes narrowing, his tone dropping into a low growl that cut straight through the noise. "Hope, Gavin. People don't hope when they can't afford gas, when their jobs are shipped overseas, when their kids can't walk to school safely. Hope doesn't keep the lights on when your state can't power itself. Hope doesn't feed a family when groceries cost double because of your party's failures." The crowd roared, Trump's words hitting like a series of body blows. He didn't stop. "You want to talk about truth? Here's the truth: California is falling apart. And if that's your model of leadership, then America doesn't need it. America needs strength, security, and results, not lectures from a failed governor." Gasps and applause thundered through the hall. The camera zoomed in on Newsom's face, his carefully crafted confidence cracking as Trump's words pierced through his rhetoric. And for the first time that night, the polished California governor seemed unsure of what to say next. The tension in the room was heavy, like the air before a storm. Newsom adjusted his jacket, trying to mask the unease creeping across his face. He leaned into his mic, speaking with sharp precision. "Donald, you've mastered one thing: anger. You inflame, you divide, you shout louder than anyone else. But leadership isn't about volume, it's about vision. And my vision is for an America that faces forward, not backward. His words carried a rhythm, polished, rehearsed. A portion of the crowd clapped, rallying behind him. Newsom pushed harder, his voice rising. You talk about families, but under your leadership, America suffered more deaths in a pandemic than any nation on earth. You talk about strength, but you left our allies questioning if they could trust us. That's not leadership, that's recklessness. The room buzzed with energy. For a moment, Newsom looked like he had seized the upper hand again. His tone sharpened with triumph. You want to talk about California? At least we innovate. At least we lead in technology, in culture, in progress. Your leadership left us with chaos, division, and disgrace. But Trump didn't flinch. He let the words hang in the air, waiting for the applause to fade before leaning forward, eyes locked on Newsom. His voice dropped low, every word deliberate. Gavin, you can dress it up in all the fancy words you want. But the truth is simple, when people think of California, they don't think of progress. They think of homelessness. They think of crime. They think of a state people are desperate to leave. The audience gasped, the bluntness cutting straight through Newsom's polished rhetoric. Trump didn't stop. You call me reckless? Let me tell you what's reckless, letting your citizens live on streets while you brag about solar panels. Letting criminals run free while you pose for glossy magazine covers. That's not leadership. That's betrayal. The hall shook with thunderous cheers and boos. Newsom's face tightened, the confidence draining as Trump's counterattack landed with crushing force. The moderator's voice cracked through the chaos, pleading for civility. Gentlemen, please, let's keep this debate focused on issues. But the audience was already on edge, their cheers and jeers filling every corner of the hall. Trump rested his hands on the podium, calm and unflinching, while Newsom shifted his weight, trying to regain balance. Newsom straightened his shoulders and spoke with deliberate calm. Mr. Trump, your strategy is clear: insult, deflect, and avoid responsibility. But Americans see through it. They see a man who lost control, who left behind division and distrust. You talk about California's challenges, but under your leadership, America itself became a fractured nation. The applause came quickly, Newsom's allies in the audience seizing the chance to cheer. He pressed forward, raising his hand as if to seal the point. You don't understand leadership, because leadership isn't about tearing your opponent down, it's about lifting a nation up. For a second, the line resonated. Cameras panned to the audience, some nodding in agreement. But Trump, his face unmoved, leaned forward with the kind of presence that silenced the room before he even spoke. His voice boomed, sharp and relentless. Lifting a nation up? Gavin, you can't even lift up your own cities. You want to talk about division? Your state is the most divided in America. Rich elites in mansions, while working families can't afford rent. High taxes crushing small businesses while you play king of climate change on TV. That's your leadership. The crowd erupted. Chants of USA. USA thundered as Trump pressed the advantage. Don't lecture me about responsibility when you can't even keep your own backyard from falling apart. California is your report card, and it's an F. The words landed like a sledgehammer. Newsom's eyes narrowed, his polished composure showing cracks once again. He opened his mouth to respond, but the roar of the crowd drowned him out. For the first time that night, it was clear, Trump had seized total command of the stage. The energy in the hall was boiling over. Supporters from both sides shouted back and forth, each word from the stage fueling the fire. Newsom raised his hand, his voice straining to cut through the roar. Donald, you live in a world of sound bites and insults. But America deserves more than slogans. We deserve serious policy, real solutions, and leaders who can bring people together instead of tearing them apart. It was a line designed to reset the debate, to paint himself as the serious statesman against Trump's brash persona. For a moment, the audience quieted, listening. Newsom leaned forward, his voice confident. Your version of leadership is fear. Mine is hope. Your version is division. Mine is unity. And that's the choice before America. The hall echoed with applause from his side, but Trump didn't wait long. He straightened at the podium, his expression hard, his voice carrying with absolute conviction. Hope and unity? Gavin, you can't even unify your own citizens. California is bleeding families, businesses, and jobs. You say you're the future, but your state is living proof of failure. He let the words hang, the silence before the storm, then hit harder. People don't want empty speeches, Gavin. They want safe streets, affordable gas, and leaders who fight for them instead of lecturing them. You don't represent hope. You represent hypocrisy. The crowd erupted again, the roar deafening. Some in the audience rose to their feet, chanting Trump's name. Newsom tried to interject, but Trump raised his hand, silencing him. His voice thundered across the hall, "Don't talk to me about leadership, Gavin. Because when the history books are written, they won't remember your speeches. They'll remember the disaster you left behind." Gasps filled the hall. Newsom's lips tightened, his comeback stuck in his throat. Trump's presence had once again seized the room, and the cameras captured it all, a moment where Newsom's lecture had been turned against him, leaving the stage trembling with tension. The debate had reached its boiling point. Both men stood at their podiums like prizefighters in the final round, the air thick with anticipation. The moderator's voice was drowned out completely now. This was no longer a structured debate but a duel of willpower. Newsom leaned forward, his eyes blazing, determined to land a final blow. "Donald, America cannot go back to your chaos. We cannot return to a time where insults replace policy, where division replaces unity. You want to talk about California? Fine. But the truth is, America rejected your brand of leadership once before, and it will do it again." The crowd roared, half cheering, half jeering. Newsom raised his chin, feeding off the moment. He delivered his closer with a sharp, deliberate punch. America doesn't need fear. America doesn't need walls. America needs hope. And you will never represent that. For a moment, it seemed he had landed his strike. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the confidence flickering back onto his face. But Trump only smiled, that knowing, almost playful grin that signaled he was about to flip the narrative once more. His voice thundered across the stage, cutting through the hall like a cannon blast. Hope without results is nothing but a slogan, Gavin. And America has had enough of slogans. They've had enough of leaders who promise the world but can't keep their own cities safe. You can talk about hope all you want, but the American people know, without strength, without security, without leadership, hope is meaningless. The audience exploded, chants of "Trump! Trump!" filling the arena. Trump lifted his hand, silencing them just enough for his final words to land like a hammer. "You want to lecture me on leadership? Gavin, leadership isn't about speeches. It's about outcomes. And the outcome of California is failure. The outcome of Trump is America first. And that's the difference." The crowd surged to its feet, the noise deafening. Newsom froze, his polished rhetoric drowned under the tidal wave of Trump's closing strike. The cameras captured it all. The moment Trump's response didn't just shake the stage, it owned it.